The best of all time, a phrase you've likely heard in a million different scenarios. And you'll hear at least the word best a lot in this video, so count along at home if you like a challenge. But what exactly does it mean? How can you quantify the best when dealing with opinions? Well, that's what I'm here to figure out today. I'm going to go through some of the most discussed contenders, both old and new, and try to figure out what made them work, as well as some of the criticisms that may hold them back from being crowned the best. And with any luck, by the end of this very video, we can finally answer the age-old question: what is the best anime of all time? The answer you may have most commonly heard in this discussion is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Even if you haven't watched the show, you're likely aware of its prominence in online discussion boards and rating sites. In particular, My Anime List, or MAL, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has all but outright refused to be dethroned as the top-rated show. And to be fair, it's not entirely without merit. Everything from the iconic intros and sound design, to the stunning visuals and action scenes, to the story and the character development, culminating in a wonderful example of all the best elements in storytelling in one piece of media. For instance, let's look at a character like Roy Mustang, the man that snapped his fingers before it was cool. One could even argue that he made it cool. Sorry, Thanos. And characters like this are littered throughout the story, and they're made all the more impactful because we're made to care about these people. Even the villains are well thought out and at times find themselves almost likable in some situations. And the show manages to do all this in a relatively short span of episodes, at least compared to one other anime we'll be discussing. Plus, what other show can truly boast such a wholesome and heartwarming story with a girl and her dog living peacefully where nothing bad happens? But the show isn't without criticism. I've heard many people say that the humor hasn't aged well in comparison to other parts of the show, and while I will say maybe the Edward being short joke is slightly overplayed, it's not anything that I believe majorly detracts from the show. Another gripe, whether fair or not, is that some believe Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was only able to be as polished and refined as it was because it had a strong foundation from the original Fullmetal Alchemist to build on. This one's a bit more tricky, because there aren't a ton of examples of this like there are in, say, the video game industry. The closest comparisons would probably be shows like Hunter x Hunter, originally coming out in 1999, and seeing a rework from the ground up in 2011, as well as Fruits Basket, which originally aired in 2001, getting its own facelift in 2019. Both seem to be well liked, and while I've heard high praise from the original versions, the newer shows are also very well received. But with relatively few examples, it's difficult to make a final verdict on this one, but I don't see a reason to necessarily take points away from any of these shows. And although it was mentioned in jest at the beginning, an unfortunate byproduct of the fervent support online is that it can turn some people off to the franchise. So, if you're someone who's avoided the show because you feel the community poisoned the well, just remember none of these people actually had anything to do with the show and its actual substance. So all that to say, don't let them win, and enjoy this show and all the others on your own terms. Another notable is One Piece, where a show like Fullmetal Alchemist is magical for having managed to tell such a complete story in a somewhat short span. One Piece is special for managing to do so in the opposite way. As of the time I'm making this video, there's over 1,128 episodes of One Piece, and yet, if you ask most One Piece fans, myself included, they would say one thing: they wish there were more. It's very rare in an epic tale like this that you can not only retain interest, but you can even increase it. The recent Wano arc resolving over 900 plus chapters into this tale, somehow drawing some of the most attention of any One Piece arc to date, being compared to or outright favored over many of its heaviest hitters like Marineford or Dressrosa. Even after all this time has passed, everything still feels earned. Luffy and the crew become stronger and take on tougher opponents at a pace that makes sense for the world, but still somehow feels fast in terms of story. It's a testament to Ichiro Oda's long-form storytelling. However, for every 5 One Piece fans who've stayed loyal and would wish for more episodes no matter the runtime, there's at least one or two who would levy all too familiar concerns. In a show spanning several decades, there's bound to be some inconsistency with animation style and pacing philosophy. Many find the growth of the show's visual style to be jarring, and at times even see these changes as a regression in artistic cohesion. The easiest way to see this is to compare the early pre-time skip One Piece Straw Hats to the characters in, say, the Wano arc, and the contrast can certainly be jarring. The differences in characters like Nami and Usopp are very apparent for more reasons than one, and the same can be said for how fights are animated or how powers like Haki are displayed to the viewer, with many citing the use of colors and flashy animation as a negative in the Wano arc in particular. So while it is certainly true that One Piece has seen visual progression over the years, the key aspect here is over the years. These changes weren't sudden for the most part. Art style and animation change over time, but this is much more easily observed when you can analyze the characters from the same show over a 20-year plus span. Ultimately, I haven't heard many people drop the show over this aspect, but because of how commonly I hear it, it seemed worth mentioning. Unfortunately, however, I have heard people drop the show over pacing issues. An obvious counter to this issue is to say that it's exclusive to the anime and isn't present in the manga, but as this is a video about anime, that's not necessarily something that should be ignored. Having said that, and I may catch heat for this, I'm a big proponent of skipping filler if you just want the meat of a story. Sure, you'll miss out on some funny character moments and possibly even a few hype moments along the way, but by and large, most filler is inherently safe to skip. Outside of filler, there can be times where subplots can occasionally overstay their welcome, and you may at times find repetitive character tropes annoying, and these concerns are completely valid. Characters like Usopp and Chopper constantly being afraid, Zoro constantly being lost, Sanji being Sanji, just to name of the few most common gripes. But I'd still say for a show that's bridged the gap between generations past, present, and most certainly future, there's way more to love than hate. Speaking of past, present, and future, Steins Gate is on many a short list for best anime of all time. A story about time travel. The exact kind of show that you watch one episode of and question your brain's comprehension skills as you attempt to grasp what unfolds in front of you. Watching the gang tackle the obviously complex topic of time travel never stops being compelling. But it isn't just about the whimsy of traversing time. It also incorporates a well thought out mystery plot with suspenseful beats to keep you an enjoyable mixture of intrigued, confused, and terrified, with a sprinkling of depressed just to keep you on your toes. By the end of this story, I don't think there was a single person not rooting for Okabe to get the good ending. Like with all the other entries in this list, Steins Gate isn't without fan criticisms. Some find the gray color palette to be dreary or without intrigue. To many, it seems obvious that the tendency towards a muted style are very purposeful, given the story's tone and direction throughout, but some people will never be pleased when it comes to art style, as we've determined. From my perspective, this is not a story that needs flashy color and animation to be visually interesting, and the colors that are used are done so skillfully to convey a level of importance or simply illustrate something standing out from the rest. Others complain the story is too convoluted, or that at times there's plot contrivances that allow story beats to occur, and while yes, there are complex mechanics at play and you can easily be overloaded with information, you are in turn rewarded if you pay close attention each episode to small details and character dialogue. This honestly seems like a show that would have been perfect to watch as it originally aired, to really give viewers a chance to sink their teeth into each episode and share theories and discuss events. And what may at first seem like a convenient out to push the story forward becomes an interesting plot element that was right in front of your face the entire time. Steins Gate isn't the only show up for consideration that excels with time. The modern masterclass, Frieren Beyond Journey's End, also has an enthralling way of tackling time. A winner of many awards and a spawner of many memes, Frieren is a story so deeply interwoven that you can watch it through 11 times and pick up a new piece of information each time. Why 11 specifically? Don't ask. Beyond even the elements of time, the show also has something surprisingly rare these days: a true fantasy world. Not in the form of an isekai, not in the form of science fiction, but pure fantasy. It has the elves, it has dwarves, it has humans, who would have guessed, and it even has, wait for it, alcoholics. And this is of course not to forget the main antagonist of the show, the demons, plus many more fantasy creatures and beings. Let's not forget the class system, including mages, warriors, priests, monks, and more. As a Lord of the Rings fan, there's not really more I could ask for. And above all that, I would say this show has the single best implementation of the flashback story device that I've ever seen. Wait for a video on that in the future, by the way. Most of the time, when I get a flashback in anime, I just find myself kind of wanting it to get back to the current moment. Frieren sometimes made me hope for a flashback to arrive just to feed my desire for more of my man Himmel and co. But even though I literally can't say enough positive things to properly credit this show, the reality is we still only have one season to go on as of right now. And because it's still such a fresh story in our minds, one may try to use recency bias as an argument to reduce the show's long-term impact. Though, I have heard from manga readers that it only gets better as the story goes on. Another criticism that I've commonly seen online is that the show's a bit slow or lacks action in some capacity, and I just honestly can't really say I understand these complaints. Within the first 2 episodes, the sheer amount of time that passes as we leave the establishment portion of the story could honestly be seen as moving too fast, if anything. Many, including myself, would be more than happy to see Frieren's journey between leaving the hero party and starting her new one, but this is likely done with the intent to reference it throughout the telling of the story. Routinely, we see the past used as a way to identify and solve problems in the present, and nothing is done without intention in this story. In regards to the action, I can say without hesitation that I wish there were more just to feast my eyes upon, but it's not because I believe there isn't enough of it. It's simply because the action we are given carries so much weight that it makes you wish there were more. If the earlier observation of this story only getting better rings true, then Frieren could easily go from simply being a contender to an outright favorite to hold the title of best. A modern example that we actually do have an ending for is Attack on Titan. From episode 1, you're thrown headfirst into an unforgiving and gruesome world. Blood and guts and humans, titans, horses, moms, everywhere. It's rare to experience a shonen where the main characters genuinely do not feel safe. Each encounter leaving you nervous your favorite character could be next on the lunch menu. You make it far enough that eventually you think you understand the scope of the world, but don't be surprised when that notion gets flipped on its head. Where there are attempts to disqualify a show based on not yet having an ending, there are similar attempts made against shows with controversial endings. And regardless of which side you fall on, it's hard to deny that Attack on Titan had mixed reviews regarding its handling of the ending. In retrospect, I believe a non-insignificant portion of these complaints were rooted in frustration about the slightly misleading naming conventions the show used for its final parts. And to be fair, the show did present us with the word final just about as many times as Eren saying Tatakai throughout the entire run of the show, but somebody simply binging the show or even just watching it after completion would likely see many of these concerns mitigated. And I'm merely here to discuss the actual show and not necessarily production-related concerns. That's a topic for a whole other video. Circling back to the actual show, one of the biggest complaints you'll find is the notion that the show stopped being as interesting when the Titans were no longer the biggest threat. For many, the most engaging part was the gritty survival of the few versus the limitless sea of Titans. Personally, I found the pseudo-political thriller twist to be fascinating. This opinion greatly benefited from a second watch, by the way, so I'd recommend doing that, and you'll probably find yourself having a slightly warmer take on the heel turn, as it isn't as entirely out of left field as many thought. And in spite of what I said regarding the ill-handled naming scheme at the end, there are some who had genuine criticisms of the actual show's ending, so in the interest of fairness, this should still be taken into account. Some claimed that Eren didn't remain true to his character in the end, or that he wasn't acting like Eren should have. Though I might argue that he stayed more true to himself than any other character. See, from the beginning his objective was to eradicate the Titans, with the underlying reasoning being that if he did so, his friends and family could live in peace and they could finally be free of the walls. And although his target may have shifted away from the Titans, his overall goal remained the same: save the people he cared about. Whether or not you agree with his methods, his mind stayed rather resolute when you look at it from that lens. Another complaint was that the post-credits scene diminished the impact of the show in some way. Essentially, the implication being that no matter how hard you try, human nature is something that simply cannot be changed. Peace can never last, and inevitably humans will always lash out at one another. But again, remember Aaron's goal? He only wanted peace and freedom for his friends and loved ones. Realistically, Aaron, or anyone else in human history, could never achieve a world free of war and hatred forever, so he sought it for the here and now instead. And now that we are here, what is the best anime of all time? Virtually every single anime you can name will have a list of detractors giving you reasons why you can't, or at the very least why you shouldn't be able to select it as the best of all time. But after thousands of comparisons and hundreds of hours of deep consideration, I believe I have finally come to a conclusion. And the best anime of all time is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And One Piece, and Steins Gate, and Frieren, and Attack on Titan. You see, anime is an art, and at the end of the day, art is subjective. Sure, you can probably say with some form of objectivity that your 4-year-old nephew Timmy's drawing of a walrus is of a lesser caliber than something by Picasso. Little Timmy's art probably means more to you, so you'd likely have a much greater attachment to it than that of a piece by a higher level artist. You'd have an even harder time making that distinction with pieces of similar passion and artistry on display. The criteria for best of all time becomes a bit different when discussing art, so the best anime of all time is the one that means the most to you. Maybe you really appreciated the character depth in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Perhaps the vast and ever-expanding world of One Piece captured your imagination. Maybe your mind was blown by the twists and turns in Steins Gate. Possibly, it was the emotional and intertwined story beats of Frieren that you felt in your heart. Or even the tragic and harrowing tale that is Attack on Titan hooked you and never let go. It could even be one of any of the thousands of choices there are out there. And you might say that's an unfair answer, or that I'm shying away from the original question, so, as a compromise, I will give you my personal pick for best anime of all time, but only under the agreement that you give me yours as well in the comments below. Did you agree yet? Yeah, I didn't really think through the verification process on this one. Oh well, if you made it this far, then the least I can do is provide my input. The best anime of all time for me is Frieren Beyond Journey's End. In a likely similar way you all feel about that special show of yours, I feel this way about Frieren. Every single episode spoke to me in a way that I've simply never experienced in a piece of media. The fantastical world filled with meaningful characters and lessons in life really kept me invested in wishing there was more. But Frieren's journey, just like mine and all of yours watching out there, is only just beginning. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you agreed to my terms earlier, give me your best anime of all time in the comments and let's talk about it. And with that said, I look forward to seeing you there, fellow anime lovers. Bye bye for now.